I'm here with Ben. He is the designer of Super Hazard Quest. And can you just tell us a little bit more about the game?
Sure, yeah. It's basically it's a card game designed to look, feel, and play like an 8-bit side-scroller. All players begin on one dungeon card. The board, or dungeon as we call it, is kind of a modular thing. Every time a room is beaten, we move into a new room, so the dungeon builds as players explore it. There's a final boss hidden in the dungeon deck. The first player to find and defeat the final boss is the winner. It's basically a combination of a Metroidvania-style game on a tabletop.
And we were just speaking earlier about the similarities with Boss Monster, so could you tell us a little bit?
Yeah, well, I teamed up with a buddy of mine who's a big tabletop gamer. I'm a big retro gamer, and we bought Boss Monster, and we really enjoyed it. Well, he really enjoyed it. You know, cool tabletop mechanics. I wanted something that played a little bit more like an old video game, like a side-scroller. Boss Monster, you are a boss monster in it. You know, you're not really the player, but it has a lot of nostalgia in it. And we wanted to take that nostalgia, but I wanted to feel like I was the player in those old games. I wanted to fight the boss monster and really go back to my Nintendo roots. So we made this game that actually has a board and monsters in it, and that's the goal of the game. You're basically a player.
So you were saying that you go through each room and then you clear it. So when players go through that level or that room again, they don't have to do anything, or are there still like things set in motion? There's
still things set in motion. They'll have to travel through the same enemies over and over if they want to go back the way they came. Basically, they're trying to expand into new rooms and find new routes. Some rooms are easier for certain players to pass. There's 8 unique characters. Each one has its own ability, its own specialty of things you can get through. So every player has his little advantage. And there's ways they can stack the dungeon in their favor. There's really a lot of player versus player contact here. We try to encourage that. We make the game really competitive.
And I'm seeing back here like the different characters. You have like a Donkey Kong, a Ryu, a Link.
Yeah.
Metal Gear.
We wanted to make it the ultimate Nintendo game. I think the idea here was that we had the chance to kind of assemble a bunch of different style levels. If you see our levels, each one is, you know, there's kind of a Castlevania Dark Forest, there's your classic desert stage, there's your ice stage, your lava stage, there's a Happy Kingdom, very Mario influenced stage. We wanted to take that and our characters too and really create the ultimate video game on the tabletop.
And how many players is this for?
It's 2 to 8 players. 4-player games, 5-player games tend to take about half hour to 45 minutes. An 8-player game could take about an hour to an hour and a half.
And then basically looks like you just connect through these holes and randomly attach like a room? Yeah,
the dungeon deck, which is what the board is made up of, is shuffled before each game, so every level is randomly generated. No 2 dungeons are ever going to be the same because not only are they shuffled, but there's also cards that take advantage of the modularity of the game that allow you to swap players or swap rooms in the dungeon to totally change up how the game works.
And then you were also talking about enemies, and I'm guessing obstacles too. Are those is that a separate card? Is that?
Yeah, there's 4 different enemies that you'll encounter, and there's 4 different bosses you're going to run into. On top of that, moving into a new room is also requires an action or an item you're going to need to use. Beating enemies requires actions. Actions are granted by item cards. There's 54 item cards in the game. Each one tells you what action it grants, and that's what gives you the inventory. It's your inventory, basically, the 5 items in your hand that allow you to move around the dungeon.
Okay, so there's always 5 items in your hand at any time?
Yep, there's always going to be 5 items in your hand, which with every hazard you encounter or enemy you encounter, you prove to the rest of the players how you're going to pass that hazard. You play that item face up. It's going to say the name of the action you need to pass it, and that card is discarded at the end of your turn. You can play any or all of the items in your hand that turn, as long as you use it properly and reach a checkpoint flag. So your inventory kind of varies, and you draw up to 5 cards again at the end of your turn.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.